Planetside 2 got a big patch a few weeks ago, and just as it came out, I was having a lot of problems with performance. Basically, my character would go into a laggy state, and everybody would look like they were moving at 1 FPS. Fortunately, whether it was my NVIDIA drivers that I've updated since then, or it was some of the hotfixes they put out, it's working now, and the performance is doing okay. And they have actually put out a hotfix a couple of days ago that they aim to get better performance out of, but whether or not that affects your system, seeing as performance is very wild over lots of different machines and different components, you'll just have to check it out for yourself. Personally, it's running fairly stable for me, going from like 100 at doing nothing in the warp gate FPS and going down to the mid-40s when I'm in a ridiculously large fight when hundreds of people are in one room. Just to mention to anyone new to my channel that's been watching my other games and gameplay that I've been putting out, Planetside 2 is a massively multiplayer first-person shooter. Just think Battlefield, but with, instead of having 64 players on a smaller map, it's a couple of thousand people in a large continent-sized map, and they're fighting over a persistent continent battling, and the end game isn't so much the end of a round, it's taking over the continent and capturing it to get the bonus for your faction. And once you've taken that continent, it gets locked and another continent opens up. But anyway, the new update has brought quite a few things, and one of the big things of Planetside 2 that's come out in the past sort of half a year, the latest big update they brought out was a construction system, and some people loved it and some people hated it. And at the moment, it is still in a bit of a funny place, as personally I went out of my way in every time I was playing since the patch has come out to try and find a great construction-based fight, because they are, honestly, when it first came out, the construction update, it was just ridiculously fun. Probably the most fun I have ever had in Planetside 2. Because normally the fights in the game tend to go around these small bases that aren't really big enough for the hundreds of people that fight there. But when it's a construction base, it's all dynamic and out in the open, and in places that are more fun to fight at with that amount of people. Either way, what they have added is interesting, and I do think it is in the right direction. For example, they've added a spawn tube, it's called the Elysium Spawn tube, meaning that you can deploy onto the base. Basically, you can respawn on the base without needing to park up the armored personnel carrier, the Sundra, which can be deployed to allow your faction to spawn on it. This basically just acts as a spawn room, and you can place it inside your base. Add that to the new addition of a light vehicle terminal and an air terminal, which means that the bases can be sort of midpoints between bases that don't have a vehicle pad that you can access very easily, or the air pad is miles away. You can use this as a forward base to get into action really quickly, and to also launch armor quickly to attack an enemy base. So I like the fact that you can make these forward bases that can be strategic in between the actual fixed bases that are already in the game. They've added a pillbox, which is pretty cool. They've added an alarm module which will go off when a squad is detected near the site. And a big one is the glaive IPC or iron particle cannon, and basically this will be able to fire onto enemy bases or enemies, tanks, zergs, or enemy troops. They'll do minimal damage to infantry, but to buildings it'll do quite a lot of damage. We'll also disable the modules inside the base. The only problem at the moment is that on the map it shows in a massive circle where the IPC is firing, and the way it works at the moment is you have to fire a dart at an actual space on the map, so you have to be there. You have to be in the spot that you want to fire at. You fire down the dart and it starts firing over a certain period of time. And the problem with that is that it shows everybody on the map where roughly the dart is, so people can easily find that dart and take it out if they're savvy and they notice on the map, if they notice the ring and the symbols that show that the glaive is firing there. But Rel has said, one of the developers on Twitter, that they're going to fix that and take that out because at the moment it just isn't working. Another one that they've added is an ammo dispenser for vehicles, which means that the base can even more be a center and a forward armor staging facility, I guess. But back to the problem of nobody really playing it. And I think there's two big parts to this. The first one is that everything on the construction system, apart from the main things like the walls, you get the anti-infantry turret for free, and you get the silo, but everything else is either really expensive in certification points, which are the in-game currency, or really expensive with real money through Daybreak coin. And it's really understandable that not enough people have it to put up any sort of useful base or meaningful base, and And 90% of the bases I went to, and I was looking around seeing whether a fight would start at, didn't have any of the Elysium Spawn tube, the new vehicle pads or infantry pads. And I can only guess it's because they don't have it unlocked, because they don't either want to invest all of their time, all of their money into these items. To be fair to Daybreak, they did make it so that the items unlock across all characters, and it's account wide now, but still there's just such a block to people participating in it. It's not exactly a pay to win thing, because it's not something that directly benefits you as a player. I do wonder how much they're actually making off of the construction system, and if it is actually really worth it. I always saw the construction as something that they were adding to add a gameplay element. With free-to-play games, there's always a line between making money, which they need to do because they need to keep the game running and they need to pay the developers, they need to make their bottom line basically, and also making it so that things are accessible. The problem with the construction system is that if it wants to be a big part of the game, then a lot of people need to have access to it. And it's not like say, a weapon or a flavor in the game. Everybody that wants to take part of the construction system has to have these advanced construction objects, or their base just isn't as good as other people's bases, or it's not as useful, or it doesn't have the utility to be useful. Who knows how much they're making from it, and in some ways I hope it's not a lot, so they can consider maybe making a lot more of the items free to players, or reducing the certification and daybreak costs of the construction items, just to make it so that it's more open to people, so that people can actually get these in the game. And the second one is that there's a bit of a problem with how the bases play out. So it's often just tanks shelling the outside of walls and taking forever to take them down whilst the repair modules inside are up and they're repairing the walls. And sometimes you don't even need to go into the base, the tanks can just shell it from outside and there's no infantry engagement. I do wonder whether there needs to be some sort of like anti-tank projectile shield, meaning that the tanks have to go through it to get inside a base. Once maybe a wall's destroyed, they have to go through that shield to get inside, or something to stop it from being that only vehicles can shell the inside of the base, and that you actually need to get close and inside and with infantry to take everything else out. Personally, I'm not entirely sure how they get this one right, but it just doesn't feel in the right place at the moment. So onto the new weapon that they added, the Naginata. So they're adding a load of Nanite Systems weapons, which are the ones that go across all the factions. They don't have a flavour in any of the specific factions, they're just Nanite Systems weapons. They're the shadowy corporation that dictates the markets in Araxis, the planet this game takes place on. And the Naginata is a bit of an odd weapon. It's got a high rate of fire, but unless you're still, it has a big cone of fire and is very difficult to control. But once you stand still, you're able to put down a lot of fire and at a great speed into one position. But, well, for most purposes, it's not the most effective weapon. It has very niche sort of situations it's useful in. For example, when you're on top of a stairway and you're looking down and trying to give suppressing fire into, say, a doorway or a little area where people are just running through or churning through, you can really pin them down at that doorway. And the same with anywhere that's sort of got a entrance that you're trying to defend, or you've got the high ground and you can see more of your enemies than they can see of you. It's not exactly a run and gun weapon because you're going to struggle with it if you do, and if you can flank enemies and get a lot of shots off, then that's always a positive. The sound on it actually just sounds like an emissary, so you could easily think that somebody had a weak SMG style pistol near you and actually be surprised when you're hit with an LMG. But also that because it's Nanite Systems, it's hard to notice as not being your own faction because anyone could be using that weapon. There were lots of changes to balance and other things added, but these were the two flagship things that really came in and I really wanted to talk about because they added things to the game. Personally, it's still Planetside 2, I'm still having fun, and I'm pacing myself because I've obviously got like 3,000 hours in it, and it's easy to get burnt out on a game like this, so always pace yourself and just take a break if you get frustrated, but actually I've been having a lot of fun recently. The bottom line is that the experience is still one of a kind, and if you want a war-like experience and an actual battleground sort of feeling, having hundreds of people fighting, and then there's no real other option to this game. You might have, say, Armoured Warfare that does the tanks really well in the same sort of scale, but then you don't have the infantry part. And Battlefield 1 may be more immersive, and arguably the mechanics are a bit tighter, but you just don't get the scale that you do in this game. So yeah, I'm having fun, and thankfully my performance issues have been sorted out, and that's sort of the reason why I haven't been making videos the past couple of weeks. What does everyone else think anyway of the update? Have you been playing the game and has it been playing well for you, or have you got a little burnt out recently? Anyway, be sure to let me know in the comments section below, and thank you all very much for watching. Until next time, Joshino.